Usually when we talk about talent and they never made it to the top, they'd have a slow rise, show some potential, maybe even get over pushed before falling off. It's something that happens very often and it's for the most part unfortunate. On the other side, you have talent that shows glimpses. Hell, they have that important moment in their career where everyone's like, damn, they're going to be something special. Then they fail to capitalize on them and the talent goes back to the mid-card, or sometimes they stay there and eventually break through. This video is about moments stars were almost made in WWE. Alright, let's get into it. Rob Van Dam. Amongst the most sought after talent of ECW, Rob Van Dam has to be near the top of the list. His revolutionary moveset coupled with his impressive charisma and uniqueness made him one to watch. It didn't take long for Van Dam to become an ECW favorite, and shows just that, and he was so damn good that Paul Heyman gave him a 2-year run with the television title. In that run, many saw the title as being more important than the world title because of the value RVD brought to it. Classic matches, impressive athleticism, and just exciting all around. He was unfortunately injured, and by the time they were going to start his journey to the ECW world title, ECW closed down. So now he's got to go somewhere else. WCW had just been purchased, so the only place was WWF. Van Dam was brought in with the alliance and immediately got over. Why? Because. But in all seriousness, RVD was just so damn unique. He already showed he was good enough in ECW, and now when he's around all these bright lights in the big time, he looked even better. Van Dam easily connected with the audience, and he was so damn good that he had the fans cheering him even though he was a heel, and add to that, he received a world title opportunity in the middle of 2001. One moment in particular I feel could have led to something special was during the Build to No Mercy. Stone Cold questioned Van Dam's loyalty, which tied into his paranoia, his worry of losing the title. RVD assured him that he was on the Alliance's side, but he was seen talking to Mr. McMahon, and there was this moment where he teased hitting the 5-star in Austin, but he hit it on Kurt instead. The trust is back. He's excited, but then the McMahon incident occurred, and at this point, RVD had a decision to make. Go for the 5-star on Kurt or Austin. He chose Austin, and the crowd went absolutely insane. They were fully behind Van Dam, and had he won at No Mercy, it would have been a special moment. But that didn't happen, and instead the peak of this push was that 5-star frog splash. It's still something I think about once in a while. Now, Van Dam didn't get that main event push then. It would take a while, and I'm pretty sure everyone agrees with me that he was a star. Sure, he could have been bigger, but it's unlike a bunch of guys in this video. At the same time, Booker T's WWF run was somewhat questionable. How could somebody who was treated with so much respect and credibility come to the WWF and just lose all the time? Who's taking beatings in supermarkets, running away from his rivals in church? We don't know why, but one thing for sure is that 2002 was a very important year in the development of Booker T. I want to say it was a star on the rise, but a star waiting to happen. Hell, you might even consider him a bit of a star. Booker's partnership with Goldust loosened him up and showed that he had the comedic skills, the charisma which you already know he had, but he got to shine bright, and most importantly, the fans' support. If you have that, especially in that era of WWE, you'll go far. On the Raw side, the world title scene provided Booker an opportunity to break through. We have that storyline. Now, I don't want to talk about it, but since I'm a wrestling YouTuber, we have to. People like you, Dollar Bill, Booker whoops his ass, and Triple H doubts whether or not he could beat him at WrestleMania. That's the story. Because they had other plans that night and were scared of having this overshadow Brock Lesnar's title victory, Booker T lost. The moment itself would have definitely been special because of the year-long journey he had, going from the most hated to one of the most loved, and there's the story itself that they were telling. When you look at it from that time period, regardless of the story itself, it was the right time for Booker T. He was charismatic, exciting, and one of the most perfect wrestlers in terms of execution. Like this guy, his movements were so damn smooth, everything he does was just good. Similar to Van Dam, he did reach the top of the mountain later, so it's not all bad, and plus, he's widely considered one of the best wrestlers of the 2000s, if not one of the all-time greats. His legacy could have been enhanced with a win at WrestleMania, but it's not all bad. In fact, it's been pretty good for him. 2004 and 2005 were very important years to the likes of Edge, Rey Mysterio, John Cena, and Randy Orton. Ed Batista. These guys were slowly getting the attention placed on them and brought a fresh vibe to the product. They were young, hungry, and talented. These were the men to lead the company for the next few years, and right under them was Christian. Christian's reputation as a tag team partner of Edge was often mentioned by others. They felt he was carried and whatever, but once he captured the Intercontinental Championship and became his own man, these claims slowly went away and he was finally his own man. Christian had his moments in the pairing with Trish Stratus really unlocked his true potential. Was he more over than Edge? That's something for you to answer. But after WrestleMania 21, it's like the fans realized, hey, Christian's pretty cool. One night in MSG, you can notice that they were slowly appreciating him, and he wasn't getting booed like he was a heel, but they were cheering him. The Raw crowd in the UK was going crazy for him, and one night in particular, Christian was so over that they just brought him on quickly for a promo. We gotta mention that this was in Calgary, so technically it's a cheat code. And 2005 seemed to be the beginning of something for him, and it was just not the way he intended. I don't think everyone was expecting him to beat John Cena, the newly crowned champion, but maybe his positioning should have been a bit higher in the card. Once again, it's no problem. Man had an iconic TNA run showing everyone he's capable, and while he did get demoted to ECW because of a leak, he proved to be the show's workhorse and eventually won the title. The circumstances may be questionable, but a title win is a title win in my eyes. While Christian had it bad on SmackDown, at least he was appearing on the show weekly. William Regal, on the other hand, wasn't a consistent fixture of SmackDown in late 2005. It wasn't until King Booker needed a mini-faction that he started appearing often. After the 2007 draft, Regal made his way to Raw as the general manager of the show. This gave him the opportunity to shine as a villainous heel that held down talent like Triple H, which sounds ironic. He started getting more aggressive, and after WrestleMania, he decided to enter himself in the King of the Ring tournament. Now, Regal's reputation around this time was that he was a respected wrestler who mastered the art of technical wrestling. But his personal issues always affected his pushes and didn't allow him to truly prosper. So when you see him win the King of the Ring, you thought, damn, they're going with him. And that moment itself where he won the King of the Ring, it felt like something was looming, and just that villainous stare from him told you everything you need to know. That moment should have been the point everyone looks at and says, William Regal became a true star here. But the storyline never materialized because he violated the wellness policy, and it was from a heavily rumored program for the title with Triple H to suspension. Truly a disappointing turn of events that didn't allow William Regal to reach the main event scene. It seemed like something was going down but didn't. Then again, on the positive side, Regal ended up winning the IC title and is highly credited these days for helping talent, but the storyline is always a what if of mine. I've never seen somebody turn off the lights in the arena because his ego was hurt. While William Regal was serving his suspension, a prospect from ECW quickly made a name for himself. This man had the athleticism to rival anybody in the WWE, and while he wasn't the best on the mic, he made up for it with his charisma. Kofi Kingston. Kingston easily stood on this era because of his Jamaican character and impressive moveset. Kofi was the perfect Intercontinental Champion, and personally, I of course liked him because he was a babyface, but there was more to it. He had talent. For Kingston, he was highly regarded as a future talent, and nobody at the time was like, hey, he should get a push now. Why? Because it came from out of nowhere. He's attacked by Legacy, and the next night he responds by destroying Randy Orton's NASCAR vehicle, and they feud. Kofi showed great drive and passion with that promo, and of course at this point, his Jamaican character was gone. All of this was leading to that moment in MSG, and in front of a sold-out crowd tuning into Raw, Kofi hit the boom drop on Orton through the table, and he stood there as a future legend in the making. Fans were going crazy for him, and it seemed like a star was born that night. For Kofi though, he had to wait a bit, and after making Orton shout stupid repeatedly at him for missing a spot, the punk kick, his push was gone. Of course, it worked out in the end in a much better storyline, so it's all good. But once again, on the other side, had that incident never happened, Kofi could have gotten pushed harder in 2010. 2010 is always that year of what if. The year turned out to be very disappointing for all kinds of reasons, but it wasn't like there wasn't a reason to be optimistic. New talent was winning titles, and it felt like something fresh was happening. To top it all off, a group of rookies made their debut, causing absolute chaos, the likes fans haven't seen in years. I'm talking about the Nexus. Their debut is what everyone was talking about, and it felt raw and different to anything else at the time. Led by Wade Barrett, the Nexus's goal was to take out anybody in their way and dominate the WWE. John Cena was the main target, and after weeks of constant attacks, Cena finally fought back, leading to an elimination match at SummerSlam. This match was supposed to be the Nexus's crowning moment, in particular Wade Barrett, because don't get me wrong, the Nexus did deserve to win the match, but the true breakout of the group was Barrett. He was tall, imposing, had a leadership quality, could talk and wrestle. John Cena though made a huge comeback, and from there the group was never the same. They tried fixing it, but it didn't work, and before he knew it, Wade Barrett was on SmackDown. Their efforts of pushing him in the future always ended with him injured, and the timing really affected it. Even then, the best moment for his push was always around SummerSlam 2010. High flyers in WWE were gaining more notoriety in the late 2000s. After the forgettable cruiserweight division in the mid-2000s, we got to see more interesting high flyers actually do something in the company. Kofi Kingston was doing well, Ray was Ray, and on ECW emerged yet another unique wrestler whose wide array of moves helped him stand out from just about anybody else in the company, Evan Bourne. Similar to half the roster at the time, Bourne was touted as the next big thing just waiting to happen. He didn't have a standout feud or match up to this point, and you can consider the shooting star from the top of the ladder a highlight. His first notable feud, well, one of his only notable feuds, was with Chris Jericho. Jericho at the time was at the top of his game and was nearing the end of what I consider to be the peak of his career. The time where he wore the suits, spoke slowly while having great matches with anyone from JTG and Shad to Shawn Michaels. Their match at Fatal 4 was pretty damn good, and I really liked it. Surprisingly, it was Evan Bourne who emerged victorious. His victory was clean, it was huge, and when you look at this from a 2010 perspective, it really looked like they were going to push Bourne hard because there's only a handful of guys that beat Jericho as emphatically as Bourne did, and from that list, the only guy that never won a world title was him. Unfortunately for him, this was where he peaked, and after violating the wellness policy and suffering injuries, he was gone. Now, this is the guy everyone talks about. Remember SmackDown in 2009 and 10? Who was one of the most exciting guys to watch there? For me, John Morrison. This man was balling harder than 2009 Derrick Rose at one point. Every week he'd be facing Jeff Hardy, Rey Mysterio, CM Punk, and he'd make the most out of it. The best thing they ever did for him at the time was turn him face because he was on a whole other level. Morrison's reputation grew as time went on, and his time on Raw seemed very optimistic, especially after SummerSlam. He was being placed in more important stories, and finally his chance to shine came at TLC. Morrison's ladder match against Sheamus is often pointed at as one of his best WWE moments for good reason. He showed up and delivered a different kind of ladder match compared to what everyone was accustomed to at the time, and his performance that night really showed there was a future near the top. He was pretty over with the crowd, and this match only enhanced his popularity, but unfortunately for him, his crazy performances weren't enough to wow those in the back. Then he had heat for WrestleMania 27, and he realized, you know what, I'm out. That's what he did later that year. Now, this one seems a bit wild, but blame me for being a little delusional in 2011. Maybe some of you felt the same way as I did, and I know there just has to be some of you. Remember Alex Riley? He was being pushed a bit on NXT Season 2. He was paired with The Miz and held that white briefcase. Then Miz loses the title and blames him. There was this one segment where Miz was just placing the blame on him, saying, "You did this. If it wasn't for you, I'd be champion." And then Riley just lashes out in anger. Miz takes this long-ass beating, and I was like, damn. And looking at it now, this man had a lot of intensity. I don't think about it often, but whenever I revisit 2011, I always think of Alex Riley. He had the look. He was a bit over at one point and had that incident with John Cena never occurred. Who knows? Maybe it would have went further. Then again, he got injured at the worst time. Now, I'm not going to say, oh, he was going to be a main event or world champion, but the guy was a bit over at one point. We got to mention that. Like everything, they just gave up on him, and I still think even if Cena never had an issue with him, they would have quit. They probably would have dropped his push. Because at the time, you had to do a whole hell of a lot to truly win over management by the looks of it. WrestleMania 28 proved to be the culmination of the year-long Rock and Cena feud. The Undertaker, HBK, and Triple H trilogy was done, and now it was off to the next chapter. New stars such as Antonio Cesaro and AEW debuted, and unlike the previous year, these new guys were being pushed harder. One of those guys that quickly made a name for themselves was Ryback. Ryback, fresh on the main roster, was seen as a Goldberg wannabe because he was big, bald, and of course was squashing jobbers without losing a single match. Oh, and they made fun of his RVD attire. Nonetheless, he's racking up wins, slowly facing more notable opponents, and after SummerSlam, this man was over as hell. He was destroying opponents and shouting, "Feed me more," and you can easily see why he was over. He was so over that they had him replace John Cena for Hell in a Cell. In this moment where Cena endorsed him, it seemed like a sign of things to come. Everyone was chanting, "Feed me more." They showed great excitement when he came out, but once he lost to Hell in a Cell, Survivor Series, TLC, and another title match, which I should note, for all those matches he was screwed over, he was seen as a loser. Now, despite this, Ryback was pretty over, so I decided, you know, we're going to do a great idea and have him turn heel, and he lost his momentum. That moment where Cena chose Ryback was really something, and if things went differently, we'd be looking at that as a special moment in his career, but it came down to the booking, you know, they had a decision to make. Unlike all these guys who were fast-tracked to potential superstardom, Dolph Ziggler's was pretty slow. He was paired with Vicky for 2 years, but it felt like 5. By the time he separated from her, he was Mr. Money in the Bank, and his inclusion in the main event scene was about as obvious as half of Roman Reigns' title matches. Ziggler's shining moment when he cashed in Money in the Bank is often considered the best cash-in by some. He was essentially a babyface in the fans' eyes, and he was a fresh inclusion in the main event scene. Now, his promos weren't repetitive like a bunch of his from 2016 to 19, where he complains in different ways. They were fresh. He had charisma, that had drive and motivation, and of course the in-ring skills. His run was highly hyped for a while, but when it happened, it was the most disappointing world title reign up to that point. Even Great Khali and Jack Swagger had a full run. Ziggler had one match, and it was the one he lost because of injury. As a result of this, he never got the trust again, you know? They thought, oh, this guy's getting injury prone, and we only wanted to give him this little chance. Fast forward to a year and a half later, Roman Reigns is set to have a huge push. But he gets injured and is sidelined for 3 months. His spot in the Survivor Series match, which if you watch the match was clearly supposed to be his, turned out to be Dolph Ziggler's. It was a huge moment and provided him an opening. Why? Because he was over as hell again. Since this was the era where Roman Reigns was being pushed hard, even in favor of Daniel Bryan, who the fans were clamoring for, he was back to the mid-card scene. Now, Dolph's had a decent career. He always finds ways to make me care about him despite his odd booking. He's Mr. Reliable for a reason. But once again, different scenarios, and we'd be looking at Survivor Series 2014 as a huge moment in his career. It's still somewhat, but the follow-up I'd say affected it. NXT as a developmental brand for WWE really changed the way we look at new talent. Because NXT at the time aired on the WWE network, it was an opportunity to know the talent before they debut on the main roster. Personal experience, I thought it was very cool seeing these men and women display world-class talent on a weekly basis. It made me hyped for their debuts on the main roster, especially when you see somebody like Kevin Owens prosper and quickly beat John Cena clean. Then on the other side, you see the likes of Sasha Banks and Becky Lynch having better matches than those on the main roster. But what about somebody that could talk? NXT had some of those, but the standout in that area to me was Enzo Amore. This guy to me was probably the most charismatic guy in the entire WWE. His mic skills were 99 overall, his selling was superb, and while he wasn't wasn't a good wrestler, he had potential to improve. His partnership with Big Cass was electric, and the night after WrestleMania 32, they debuted. This debut to me was supposed to mark the beginning of something special for Enzo Amore. He came in, ripped apart the Dudleys in unique fashion, and treated them like the biggest jobbers with the entire crowd by his side. And when I mean the entire crowd, I mean it. You should go watch that clip of them debuting. It was ridiculous, and in terms of most over moments since then, there's not many. And the way his career turned out is a shame. He's down in MLW now, but you don't hear much about him unless you're watching. But yeah, the night after WrestleMania to me, I thought it was going to be the start of something. I thought this was going to be a moment everyone looks at in the career of Enzo Amore, but it wasn't. Enzo's debut brought great optimism for the next talent to get called up, and this man's debut was long awaited. Finn Balor. Balor's reputation at this point was very high. Leading the Bullet Club, Devitt turned into one of the most sought-after talents. Bullet Club turned into a global phenomenon within the wrestling world, and all that is credited to Prince Devitt. He signed with WWE in 2014 and immediately was hyped up. As the renamed Finn Balor, the Demon was unleashed, and Balor became the most successful NXT wrestler of all time, holding the title for 287 days. Balor at this point had accomplished everything down in Full Sail, and his debut seemed imminent. I remember at the time hearing, "Oh, Finn Balor's coming," and it turns out nothing happened. It was a common thing at the time until the draft. He gets drafted very early on, and it was like, finally. About time. And with regards to his push, let's just say they wasted no time. Like, bro, this man just set foot on the main roster and he's beating Roman Reigns clean. Huh? That night, I thought the sky was the limit for Finn Balor. Sure, Roman got suspended, but to have him beat the top face of the company shows you what they think about him. Then he has his crowning moment at SummerSlam, which of course ended up costing him several months because of the shoulder injury. The injury hurt Balor a lot, and on the main roster, he's never the same. That said, he's in a decent spot at the moment. It's just, once again, I really thought that victory against Roman on the first Raw of the new era was going to propel him to greater heights. I really thought he was going to be one of the big guys in WWE up there with Seth Rollins and Roman Reigns, but it just wasn't to be. To say this was one of the most unexpected things to come out of 2017 WWE would be an understatement. Braun Strowman's popularity with the crowd up to this point was mild. I don't think there was many that would say he was their favorite wrestler. Strowman was booked strong, he almost never lost, and after WrestleMania, his stock went up. Strowman attacked Roman Reigns repeatedly, once near the backstage area, next on the stretcher, and to top it all off with a hat trick, "I'm not finished with you." The man flipped an ambulance, as ridiculous as it sounds. Why wouldn't you like him from here on? This is easily the most important moment in Strowman's career up to this point, and they'd only get wilder as the weeks, not years, but weeks went by, because on the next Raw, he broke the ring with Big Show. Strowman's momentum can all be traced back to that night he attacked Roman Reigns. The fans started getting into him, and it was easy because this man was flipping cars, throwing guys into dumpsters, and best of all, to some of the fans, it was beat up Roman Reigns. His momentum led to him facing Brock Lesnar for the title. We all know how that went down. I'd say compared to almost everyone on this list though, Strowman was more or less considered a star in WWE, but his booking really prevents him from jumping a bit higher. Then again, almost everyone wishes they had the same position as 2017 to 19 Braun Strowman, so there's that. Alright, what you guys think of this video? Please comment down below, and that's it for this video. Make sure you hit the Trouble in Paradise on the like button, and perhaps the coup de grace on the subscribe button. Peace, I'm out.